Hey everybody, Patrick Verno here. Sorry, running a few minutes late, some technical difficulties. So let's hope my mic stays live. Um, this episode, I wanted to talk about really self-awareness and awareness of others. In the first part of my book, The Leadership Bridge, I talk about really the first part of the bridge that we need to build is with ourselves. And if we don't have that part of our bridge built successfully, it's very difficult for us to be there for anybody else. And in doing that, I have found the most effective way is really drawing on a lot of the research and work around emotional intelligence and starting off specifically with self-awareness, because to me that's the foundation of how we begin to I think understand ourselves. Now, I am certainly not the person that says that emotional intelligence is the be all end all, that it's the only thing that you need, but I certainly think it is a very important component of what we do in terms of how we develop skills. One thing I want to make sure of, though, is that when we'll often hear people say, oh, that person's not self-aware based on their behaviors. And that's not the only individual that I think can behave poorly. I believe, and certainly my experience has been, is that people can be very self-aware of their behaviors and how they treat others poorly, and they still don't care. I remember working many years ago with an organization that had an executive on that team that was very aware of his poor behaviors and the impact that that had on others. So he was very self-aware of how he acted, knowing what it would um, the impact that would have on those, and he just didn't care. So I think that's important for us to make sure that we discuss, is that self-awareness is not this overly enlightened aspect of who we are. I think when we are better at understanding ourselves, when we're aware of ourselves, if we think about emotional intelligence, it's really about perceiving, understanding, and managing our emotions and those of others, right? So perceiving, understanding, and managing. So first, we need to recognize that it's there. Next, we need to understand what's causing this. Why does it happen? And then how do we manage it so that we're most productive? And the model that I use is called GENOS, emotional intelligence. It's a model that's been based a lot of the research around a workplace environment. And to me, that's what I found appealing to it over a decade ago. I think I started with this model back in 2008. I was certified in it, and I really enjoy it. The assessments that you're able to use through those are really, I find, very beneficial in terms of especially doing multi-raters or 360 evaluations, where somebody might think they're really good, they're really very self-aware, or they have a good demonstration of awareness of others. And when other people are asked to rate them on the same skills, those same emotionally intelligent behaviors that they rated themselves, they find out that there are oftentimes some gaps in terms of how I show up versus how other people perceive me as showing up. And that's important for us to be able to develop ourselves as leaders, knowing that. There are several other skills in regards to the GENOS emotional intelligence model that I use, and it's based on a wheel. So we have self-awareness, awareness of others. Those are the two that I want to touch on this episode. Then there's emotional expression. How do I show my emotions? Then there's emotional reasoning. How do I get people to buy in, understanding other people? And then formulating strategies or ways that I can get them, or we can gain agreement on things. Then there's emotional self-management. How do I manage stress around me? Next is, how do I help other people to manage their stress? And then lastly, out of the 7 behaviors, it's around self-control, emotional self-control. How do I help develop that? And in other episodes, we'll go through those other modes. But I wanted to focus again on the first 2, because I do think that they are vitally important for what we do. So self-awareness, awareness of self. How can we develop that? Well, there are a couple exercises that I have found very valuable that I will often use. And the first one involves really identifying common emotions that you might exhibit. Or if you were to Google a list of emotions, print those out and then take a pen and, as an exercise, or a pencil, and go through and mark down, of those emotions, which ones are positive, which ones are negative and which ones you think are neutral, right? So as simple as that. And then from that point, what you do is say, okay, well, if frustration is an emotion that I think is negative, why? What workplace events or situations might I experience frustration in? What causes those? And I think that's really important for us to we're starting to connect the dots here. Now, what's interesting about this is that we start to learn as well in terms of I might look at frustration as being a negative emotion for me, whereas somebody else could say, well, quite frankly, I think frustration is a positive emotion because when I'm feeling frustrated, it creates a drive in me to overcome that frustration, to find a solution to, or reflect on what is it about this that's causing the frustration. So I think it's really important for us again to understand, where do these come from? How do we define them? And the more we're able to identify the most common behaviors or emotions that we experience, we start to build this first skill of being self-aware. So from that point, what we do is or in exercises that I've done and through Genos, is then say, let's look at values. What are the things that we value? And again, if you were to Google a list of values, if you're having trouble thinking of those on your own, you might be able to go through that list and say, yeah, these are the things that I value. Maybe it's integrity, or maybe it's competence, or family, or honesty, whatever those are, humility. You look at the list of what's important to you, and then what you start to do is say, what are the things that create an environment where family is a value that I feel is satisfied? Or what do I do? What events create an environment where I feel like that value that I have of family is threatened or is sacrificed? And I think that's really important, because what we'll start to see is that based on that definition of, and let's just use family, if I'm in a work environment and say I am asked to go on a work trip, and I also have one of my children or my wife and I have an event, maybe it's a birthday, something else, and it coincides with that meeting that I'm going to be away, chances are my emotions, something is going to sort of bubble up, and maybe it's resentment or some other emotion, because family is a high value of mine, and it's being threatened right now by having to be away during what I find are very important moments. I can recall working for an organization once, and I was part of their leadership development program, and my daughter had a sporting event after school, and I was asked to meet with one of the other managers after 5 o'clock, and it was going to impact me being able to go to this event. And I told my manager that I wasn't able to do that because I was going to be going to this event for my daughter, and I wasn't going to miss it. And I remember he didn't say much about it at that point, but a week later when we traveled together, he really went on to tell me that based on where I wanted to go within this organization, that I was going to have to sacrifice my family from time to time if that was something that I wanted to pursue. Basically telling me that don't go to a sporting event if it's going to conflict with us having a meeting together. It was the best thing that I could have heard at that point, because it made me realize that my values and the values of where this was going were incompatible, and they weren't going to get better. And I used that to my advantage. So again, you probably have a handful of values that are really important to you. And I'd ask you to look back at times when you've been really happy, really frustrated, really angry, whatever it might be. You can start to connect the dots here. You'll start to maybe see, oh, you know what, last week I was really angry at this event, and start to think and say, what was it? What value, if I were to attach a value to that moment, what would it be? What value was threatened? And the opposite of that. When you're in a place where you feel really engaged, you feel fully aligned with the organization, you probably have certain values that are being satisfied. And I think that's so critically important for us to understand what those are. What are our values? What are the emotions that probably we can attach to those? And then how do we show up? Because once we start to put this together, then we can probably start to recognize when events are coming up that we know that we're being threatened right now or they're being satisfied. And how are we going to respond to those in a way that's more productive than probably we might if we're not aware of those and we just sort of act automatically. So I would say that's critically important. There's another exercise that we do in a workplace setting where we ask people to list certain values, or we list the values around leadership, integrity, collaboration, and ask people to rate them. Right, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, or 1 to 5, 1 being most important, 5 being least important. How important is this value to you? And in a group setting, what you start to understand is where do people place their values? And that can be very important as we relate to a team. The other component of this that I think is really important is as we go through that, say as a team, we ask people to write down their definition of that value. And we can see how things can really, there can be a difference. Let's just say that if I ask everybody to define what integrity means to them, what is their definition? There are going to be variations on what integrity means. And I think that's really important, again, for us to start not only building awareness of ourselves, how do I value these things? How do I define these things? But we start to now get into awareness of others. Because really all we're doing is when we're building a better awareness of others is we're probably drawing off of our own values, right? Because other people have those same things. They have the same emotions or maybe different emotions, but they have triggering emotions. They also have certain values. And I bet you could probably take people that are close to you and without really knowing what those values are, maybe knowing situations where you've been around somebody and they've been angry at an event that happened, you probably can get pretty accurate in terms of understanding there's a value there that they had that was the emotion was drawn out because that value was not being satisfied, and vice versa. So again, that's how we start this. You start out with yourself, right? Understanding what my emotions are, positive, negative, neutral. What are those events that create those emotions for me? And then what are the values that I hold personally? And how do I show up when those are either satisfied or threatened? And again, when we start to do that, you're going to build a greater self-awareness of who shows up, and also how do you interact with other people in events when those things are threatened. It almost gives you an opportunity to ahead of time create a plan for how you're going to be more effective. So I hope you found this valuable. Again, this is the first part of the book, the leadership bridge that I talk about. This is about building our internal bridge. If we don't build that first, it's very difficult for us to be there for anyone else down the road, or at least as effectively as we need to be. So I hope you found this valuable. Again, future episodes, what we'll talk about is around expression. How do we then demonstrate those emotions that we might have in a more productive way? How do we gain reasoning? And how do we help to manage ourselves through those emotions? So I hope you found this valuable. If you haven't had an opportunity, my book is still on sale, as I have said many times in my posts. $4.97 is what Amazon has put this book at right now. Even though it's listed at $16.95, I believe, or $16.50, somewhere in that area. They have decided that this book is going to be on sale for an unlimited amount of time. I hope you find this valuable. I hope you have an opportunity to buy it. As I said, it's less than a gallon of gas, and you're going to get far more mileage out of this than the gallon of gas will get you. So until the next episode, I hope you're able to go out there and rise above your best. Take care. And I'm now going to end it.